was what's called the Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace through Separation. And I want to read just a couple of brief portions from its opening statement of principles. Point A says, whereas the United Methodist Church and its members, after careful reflection, discussion, and prayer, have fundamental differences regarding their understanding and interpretation of Scripture, theology, and practice. And then moving to the end, point G, whereas those who are signing this propose a restructuring of the United Methodist Church by separation as the best means of resolving our differences, allowing each part of the church to remain true to its theological understanding while recognizing the dignity, equality, integrity, and respect of every person. So the protocol, recognizing separation as the best resolution to our differences and creating a pathway to such separation, has been endorsed by the Council of Bishops. And so, at least up to this point, some kind of separation has been affirmed by most of the leaders of most of the subgroups of our larger church. We're here tonight to better understand what has led to this point, how separation might look as it's currently proposed, and to offer some information about what the major traditional option is going to be. I want to say I'm taking seriously the final words of Section G, and I trust you are too, regarding recognizing the dignity, equality, integrity, and respect of every person. Now, I am a traditionalist, and you are going to hear that bias in just about everything I say. I'm not trying to hide that. I'm certainly not here to judge the character of anybody or any group that differs with my understanding. So I say to you at the beginning now, the remarks I am about to make will include commentary that's based on my experience and knowledge and perspective. So I'm here to address the question, why is the UMC splitting? Now, if you haven't attended or watched one of the last several general conferences, or if you haven't paid much attention to United Methodist News for the last 50 years, you might wonder why. I've had people say to me, I go to an annual conference here, we seem to get along just fine. What's the problem? Even so, it is common knowledge at this point that the presenting issue that seems to be pushing us toward separation is human sexuality, same-sex weddings, and the ordination of practicing LGBTQ plus persons being the most visible examples. But human sexuality issues are just the tip of the iceberg. They are the most visible, and probably more importantly, the most visceral, emotional part of a greater theological divide. Now, that divide has been coming since the Garden of Eden. But looking back, not quite so far, theological differences, particularly divisions in how Scripture is understood as we do it today, began long ago, and we're going to go into the weeds just a little bit. And so you've got me, and you're going to have to put up with that. This really started in a more formal way during the Reformation, in the period in the 1500s and 1600s. That was the infancy period of the so-called scientific method. It gave birth to the idea of approaching all topics with questions, which hopefully the human mind could understand, investigate, and eventually answer. In the 1700s, the period in which John Wesley lived, which is now identified sometimes as the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason, the study of theology began to include not just questions, but skepticism as an approach to Scripture and the general subject of the supernatural. Reason began to be seen not just as a tool in understanding Scripture or divine revelation, but as a legitimate replacement for divine revelation. Not long ago, I saw a bumper sticker on another car that said, "Question everything." That spirit was emerging in the academic world even of John Wesley's day. In the 1800s, theologians began to more rigorously apply the scientific method to the study of Scripture. And the term criticism began to be used to relate to subjects such as the historical accuracy of the sources of Scripture, the various texts that were used for translation. And it became a part, criticism, higher criticism, lower criticism, became part of the theological method and language. This reflected, in the 1800s, the rationalistic spirit of the emerging modern age, which was enamored with the vision of science eventually replacing faith. In the latter part of the 1800s and the beginning of the 20th century, theology and politics took on the prototypes of the polarization that we see in our church today. You may remember studying about the so-called modernist fundamentalist debates of the early 1900s. Well, they were a foreshadowing of the progressive traditionalist disagreements of our day. At the same time, as the 20th century was coming in, the social gospel movement represented the modernist conclusion that evangelism had not only failed to change the world, that it was based on the divine authority of Scripture, which modernists considered out of date. The social gospel movement focused on not the individual, changing the individual, but on corporate structures. Sounds familiar, I suspect, in business, government, academia, education, and the media. Modernists, like many progressives today, essentially rejected evangelism, saying it's just too exclusive and even simplistic. So the modernist move, again, we're talking about 100 years ago now, away from scriptural authority was a real thing even then. And perhaps their mood and attitude is captured in one of their favorite mantras, which was, "Let the world set the agenda." In other words, the Great Commission, they thought, needed to be replaced by the perceived needs of society as the primary focus and calling of the church. So as the 20th century unfolded, with some notable exceptions, this general attitude became the prime influence in our seminaries, our boards, and agencies. Now, one of the great questions that has come up in these meetings has been, if traditionalists have been the majority at general conferences again and again and again, why don't the progressives leave? Well, there are a number of answers to this. Just let me share with you the ones that are most important to me. At the last general conference in St. Louis, when the traditional plan again passed, a representative from the Western jurisdiction, which is 99.9% progressive, stood up. And I think a lot of people thought maybe he was going to say, "We're leaving." But instead he said, "We're never leaving." They believe that traditionalists, and I don't say this in any pejorative way or negative way, it's just a fact, that traditionalists in our denomination are doing harm to LGBTQ people, and they need to stay and fight. Also, the way our discipline is set up, you've probably noticed in the last 20 or 30 years how difficult it is to discipline a bishop. And I've got so many things in my head. Stick to the text. Okay. Bishops are elected within jurisdictions, and they are disciplined within jurisdictions. You know, back in 2016, there was a practicing lesbian woman elected a bishop in the Western jurisdiction. That went through our trial, the judicial council. They said that was wrong. She should be removed. and then that went to the bishops of the Western jurisdiction to act on. Well, we're still waiting for them to act on it. Well, because progressives understand they have that kind of leverage, again, please, if I sound pejorative or negative, I don't mean to. It's just, again, these are the realities we have. They think, we'll just stay and wait it out. That's one of the reasons. But beyond that, and this is something I think sometimes people just don't realize, maybe in the pew, but progressives and centrists have dominated the United States church for so long that they believe they are the majority. They really do. And factually speaking, as far as United States delegates to General Conference, they are the majority for the next General Conference. Now, because of traditionalists in Africa, the Philippines, and so forth, the traditionalists tend to still be, by a slim margin, the overall majority. But you can see why, from a progressive point of view, they think we've sort of been in charge. Why should we leave? So that's all part of what we're dealing with in the fact of the frustration of why it is they don't want to leave. Now, the women's division is a paradigm of how influence of conservatives and traditionalists has shifted. You know, in the first half of the 20th century, the women's wing of our denomination sent some of the most formidable evangelical missionaries of the century around the globe. And now, the women's division, and again, I don't say this, I think it's just a fact, is primarily a social justice agency. It uses language about spiritual growth, but it has no interest in evangelical missions. And if you don't think that's so, just look at their website. It all seems fine, and I don't want to be critical of them in any unnecessary way, but one thing will be totally missing, and that is any concern for the lost. There is none. Now, let me be quick to say that a lot of work that comes under the women's division is terribly important, and I'm thankful for it, particularly their work in the area of the needs of women and children around the world. Some of it is powerful, and we should be proud of it, and I thank God for it. As a pastor, several of the churches I have served have basically been held together by the UMW. For years, as a pastor, I puzzled over the shift that seemed to be happening in this area of the church. How come they couldn't have maintained a balance between evangelism and justice? Well, the answer brings us back to the question that I began with: why will the UMC split? At the core of our struggle, deeper than human sexuality, is really the question of whether or not people need a Savior from their sins. In many parts of our church, in the United States, particularly among clergy, the answer would be no. We don't need to be saved from the judgment of God because God is love and He doesn't judge, He doesn't reject. I've been reading some history of Methodism in this century, and I noticed in 1998, the University Senate, which approved seminaries, took Gordon Conwell Seminary off of the approved list, which is a very orthodox seminary, and added Harvard. And so I went to the Harvard website just to see what was there. And what was interesting to me was one of the deans had recently spoken, and there was a text of his message, and he was very proud that one of his children was an atheist. And he said, you know, I think it's great to follow Jesus, but we don't need to believe in Him. I'm not sharing that as some sort of weird thing out of the blue. I really think that's where a lot of mainline theological education is. One of the first illustrations, I get to do a little preaching here. One of the first illustrations I used as a very young preacher concerned the time when the devil was looking for a new recruit to send to earth to cause trouble. Candidates lined up. One of them said, "I'll tell them there is no heaven." And he said, "That's old stuff." The next one said, "I'll tell them there's no hell." He said, "Yeah, I like that. We've been using that one pretty effectively, but it's not new. I want something new." And the third one said, "I will tell them there's no hurry." You know, the first generation of Methodist missionaries to go to Africa had a life expectancy of 2 years. Africa was called the missionary graveyard. And you could say that was foolish. And there are significant parts of our church in the United States and Western Europe who would say evangelism is just a bad form of colonialism. But Africa, because of those people who went, knowing they may not live very long, is now where Methodism is thriving the most. Now, I can tell you, having attended the last 3 general conferences, there is no hurry in the United Methodist Church to save the lost, because much of our leadership doesn't believe anybody is lost. And we wonder why we've been declining since 1968. Now, at the General Conference, following the creation of the United Methodist Church, and I'm talking about now 1972, a new theological statement was adopted, and at the heart of it was the term pluralism. The idea was we're a big spectrum in our church of beliefs, and that's true. Now, that was later changed in the 1980s at another general conference, but it expressed a great truth about our church. And it sounds good in theory, but pluralism as an official position was really an experiment. And what we're going through now is a result of that experiment. The idea that a church can exist without a unifying confession of faith, except to say the one thing that unifies us is that we agree not to agree, I think that's irrational. That's my opinion. But I can assure you that across our denomination, there are people who will even go so far as to teach that John Wesley didn't really care about doctrine. He just cared about mission, about serving people. Maybe you've heard the saying, doctrine divides, love unites. I hate to say it, but that's a doctrine. Anyway, Wesley, of course, famously said, "You have nothing to do but save souls." And do you remember what the qualification was to get a ticket to be in the Methodist societies of Wesley's day? It was a desire to flee the wrath to come. In other words, to be a Methodist in the first generation, you had to be concerned about not going to hell. I'm not sure how that fits with not caring about doctrine. In 1995, I attended the kickoff of a new renewal organization in United Methodism called the Confessing Movement. Former Candler seminary professor and our former bishop, Bishop William Cannon, was one of its leaders, and it was formed to address the below-the-surface issues that are at the heart of why we're splitting. And those issues include the uniqueness of Jesus Christ as the divine Son of God, the need for repentance and salvation, and the authority of Scripture. Now, today, United Methodism is a pluralistic denomination. There are members everywhere on the spectrum, and probably in this room there are some people all over that spectrum, from extreme liberal to extreme conservative and combinations of both. But when you go to General Conference, the division between traditional and progressive, right and left, is dramatic. It's palpable. It's toxic. In St. Louis in 2019, it was a shortened conference. The first day we had worship and prayer. The unity was striking. And that was because centrists and progressives thought that the one church plan, you may remember that, would pass. And the one church plan would basically mean that each pastor and each congregation could decide what stance they took on human sexuality. When a vote came and the traditional plan passed again, the acrimony hit the fan. For me, the saddest example was from the person who was the primary signer of the One Church plan, Tom Berlin from Virginia. Tom is a very smart man, probably will be a bishop before long. I've been in many meetings with Tom. I respect him in many ways, but in his message, he angrily described traditionalists as a virus that would destroy the church. One of our clergy delegates who had developed a conversational relationship with a progressive woman from another conference was approached by her during the course of the day, wanting to persuade him to change his mind and vote for the One Church plan. And before that conversation was over, she had berated him with profanity and tried to abuse him into submission, change his traditional views. He finally said, "I'll vote for the One Church plan if you can guarantee me that it will not later be changed to compel everyone to take the progressive viewpoint." She just turned and walked away. Pluralism can only stretch so far. And we've reached the breaking point, and that is why it appears we are splitting.
Get this microphone on. Well, if you have just been through the weeds, then welcome to the jungle. This is the part I get to share with you. I'm Jimmy Townsend, senior pastor now over at Park Avenue in Valdosta. You know, one of the things we've been thinking about in these gatherings, and I think this is number 6 of 7, we've had crowds similar to what we've had tonight. So thank you for coming out. But one of the things that we have been thinking about is living on this side of the split that's eventually going to come, and what it's felt like to do that. And so what I've done is we've drawn a line here to represent that moment in the future when the split will finally occur. But I want us to think for just a second about what it has felt like to be on this side of it for so long. The feeling of maybe some of those feelings may have welled up in you as Don was sharing so beautifully what has led us to this point. And here's what we have heard at some of the gatherings on this side of the split, where we've been living for the last 40 years. I'm not talking about whether you are a traditionalist or a progressive, because if you are either, you have probably felt some of these same emotions. Here's what some people have said on this side. Division, conflict, frustration. Anybody sense that living on this side of it? Here's another one, a sadness. There is, some people said, distrust and fear and worry and aggravation and, of course, delay and even anger on this side. I think we've all felt some of those emotions as well. And then we began to dream about what it might look like on the other side. And so the Lord gave us some scripture to turn to, which is always a good place to go. And it comes from 1 Peter. And he writes these words. Look at what he says. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God. And here's what I think we all believe, that whatever happens with the split, that we must begin with a spirit of humility. And so he says, humble yourselves under the mighty power of God. And at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. At the right time. When this happens, whenever it happens, we know that God will make it at the right time. And then he says this. He says, give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. But then he gives us this warning, stay alert, watch out, for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And look what he says. He says, stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. And then he reminds us that there are others who've been going through this as well, all around the world, in fact. Methodism, as we know, reaches around the world. Remember that your family of believers all around the world is going through the same kind of suffering you are. In his kindness, God called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus, which goes back to the heart of what Don was saying. So after you've suffered for a little while, he will, look what's going to happen. Watch this. Restore, support, and strengthen you. And he will place you on a firm foundation. And then he says, all power to him forever and ever. Amen. And so I'm wondering, the day's coming, I hope it'll be in our lifetime, when this will be over. Can you imagine what that might feel like to be on the other side of it? And so we asked some folks at these gatherings that we've had before now, and here's some of the words. Peace, a freshness, renewal, revival. Can anybody say amen to that? Resurrection, joy, encouragement, mission, holiness, integrity, and release. Release from what many of us and many of you have been going through for so long. The other side and what it might feel like. I mean, I don't know about you, but I greatly look forward to that day when we'll experience all of that. Well, how do we get there? I want to spend some time getting into, as I said, the jungle a little bit. So how do we get there? I want to give you some options, and this is a lot of information you may already know. It's been amazing. We've been to, as I said, 6 of these. Some of the folks who show up have no idea about these options. So you've got a handout. It's going to help you a little bit with that when you leave. But let me just run through the options. Here's the first one. Option number 1 is, as Don was saying, we hope and pray that the protocol will pass at the next General Conference, which right now is scheduled for August and September of the coming year, 2022. Under the protocol, if it passes, an annual conference can leave, according to the terms of the protocol, or an individual church, if they disagree with the direction that their annual conference goes with. You must join under the protocol. If you leave, your church leaves, you must join the new traditional denomination, remain in the post-separation UMC or some other denomination. And that's a key point, because a church under the protocol cannot leave and become an independent church. The terms of the protocol do not allow that to happen. So under the protocol, if you leave, you would get to take your property with you. The trust clause, which now says that all property held by United Methodist Churches in the South Georgia Annual Conference is held in trust for the South Georgia Annual Conference. And one of the provisions of the protocol is that that trust clause is waived. Here's the other benefit. The other benefit of the protocol is that the church does not have to pay any fees or charges upon leaving under the protocol. That's the first option. And it requires the General Conference approval for that path to be an option for us. But here's the second option. Option number 2 is this. It is disaffiliation. Now, let me get a showing of hands. How many of you have heard of this before? Disaffiliation. Raise your hand so I can see. All right, so a lot of you have. Some of you have not. You'll notice one thing. I put disaffiliation in green. What does green usually mean? Money. Yeah, money. And so there is a money element to this particular option. It's available currently because of the disaffiliation policy that was passed at General Conference, the College General Conference in 2019. It's paragraph 2553. But South Georgia also passed a similar disaffiliation policy following that called General Conference. And so both of us have that available through our conference and through the Book of Discipline. An individual church can leave the United Methodist Church under this option. But to do so, they're going to have to work with the annual conference under what's called a disaffiliation agreement. And we've got copies of those. You can actually go online and get those if you would like to see what all's involved there. But under this one, there are some fees that have to be paid. And here are the fees, just so you'll know. You can find this in the policy. Here's what it says. You must pay the balance of the past 12 months of your apportionments. And you must pay an additional year's apportionment. But in addition to that, here's what else you have to pay. You have to pay your church's percentage of the pension liability. And that's a figure that you can get from Derek McAleer in the conference office. We have done that just to find out. We've done that at our church at Park Avenue over in Valdosta. And here's the current number. It may be adjusted depending on what the market does. But here's the number. For us to disaffiliate, it would take about $220,000 in apportionments and another $440,000 in the pension liability, for a total of $660,000 in order for us to follow this process. So you see why I have the green there. It requires a lot of money in most cases. If your church is wanting to know, just call Derek McAleer's office and he can get you the information as it applies to your church. Here's the other part of the disaffiliation provision. A church can go independent, or it can join another denomination, the Global Methodist Church, Free Methodist, some other denomination, but it cannot use the word Methodist in the name of the church anymore unless it affiliates with another Methodist denomination. That's what the policy says. The trust clause, likewise with the protocol, it's waived so that you get to maintain your property and keep your property. Now, there's a third option, and this is one that we've had a lot of discussion about recently, and this is not an option that I think or we think has a high percentage of likelihood, and that's that the annual conference would leave as a whole if the protocol does not pass. Now let me clear up what may be a little bit of confusion there. If the protocol passes, remember what I said in option one? The annual conference under the protocol can pull out and it can vote to be part of the Global Methodist Church if that's what our annual conference would decide to do. Under the provision, under option three, we are assuming that the protocol does not pass. And there are some who are arguing that even still an annual conference can pull out as a whole and become in essence a mini denomination for a period of time and perhaps join the Global Methodist Church at some other point. An annual conference under those circumstances could just be independent. It could in essence pull out and sit in the parking lot until things shake out and the annual conference decides what to do. But there's some questions. And here are some of the questions. The first question is this: what about the trust clause? Would the annual conference vote to withdraw the trust clause? Would our theology, what's it going to be in this mini denomination? What's our leadership going to look like? We know because Bishop Graves has told us that he does not intend to leave the United Methodist Church. He intends, because of the integrity he believes that he needs to uphold, he will be a part of the post-separation UMC. And I respect that. We respect that. So what's our leadership going to look like? Will we eventually join the Global Methodist Church? And is it even legal? There are a lot of arguments out there that an annual conference can't leave without the protocol. So those are the three options that are available out there. There are some key dates that you need to know about under each option. And I've set these up so that you know these key dates per option. So the first option is the protocol. And here are the key dates that you need to know about there. The first one is this: will General Conference meet August, September of 2022, as it's set to do currently. And you could probably flip a coin right now as to whether that's going to happen or not. There is a group of folks who say, absolutely, we're working hard, we're pushing it, we believe we're going to meet. They've already contacted us about housing for that general conference, but we're still in a pandemic. And I don't know if you read the news recently, but you may notice that there's a new surge in Europe. There's numbers are going up in different regions in the United States. So is it going to meet or not? We really don't know. But here's the next key date. This coming February, somewhere around the end of February, 1st of March, the Commission on General Conference will meet to make that decision. They did that last year and let us know that we would not be meeting during this year. And so we can anticipate that they're going to tell us then, that's kind of the last date that they can, make that call. And we'll know then whether we're going to have General Conference or not. If we do not have General Conference, the consensus seems to be that they'll kick it down until 2024, because it doesn't make sense to go ahead and reschedule this one for 2023 and then turn around and do another one in 2024. So it's most likely that if we don't have General Conference next year, that the protocol would not come up for a vote until 2024, if then. Here's a struggle with that. In order to prepare for General Conference 2024, we have to re-elect delegates to General Conference. And it may very well be, as we've seen in the past, that the progressive delegates continue to grow every time we have a General Conference in the U.S., and that's likely to happen again as well. There's some other issues about the protocol. Some people are suggesting that there might be amendments to it if we do meet next year. You also have to consider whether the Judicial Council will approve it as constitutional. They most likely will review it. So there are a lot of uncertainties about the protocol, but let me say this, it's the best path forward right now. And so if you're a praying person, and I assume you are good Methodists and you're a good praying people, pray that we have the General Conference and that the protocol will pass. Now, there's some key dates to know also under the disaffiliation route, and here are those dates. The first one is this. The annual conference must approve any efforts to disaffiliate by a local church. And our next annual conference will be, we understand we're going to meet in person in Columbus in June of next year. And so those churches seeking to disaffiliate would need to know these key dates. Here's the next one. By April the 1st of 2022, if a church intends to disaffiliate in June of 2022, you must have had your church conference make the final vote to disaffiliate. And you must have done that by April the 1st of 2022. The same thing would be true if you were intending to disaffiliate in 2023. So, the policy that allows for disaffiliation currently is set to expire on its own terms on December the 31st of 2023. Now, we've had conversations with our conference leadership, with Derek McAleer. He's told us that the trustees, the bishop has said the same thing to us, that the cabinet and the trustees intend to treat the disaffiliation policy as still applicable, even if it's not extended by General Conference. So it may be that we're able to disaffiliate at a later date after December the 31st of 2023. That's not official yet, but that seems to be the consensus of the group. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to give you this timeline. And I want us to work backwards through this timeline. Because if you're looking to disaffiliate, here's what I want you to know. We're currently in 2021, 2022 is coming, so the dividing line you see there, and we want to start with annual conference of next year. In order to be considered for disaffiliation, here's what you have to do. Remember, I said April the 1st is the deadline for the church conference. Now, you know the difference between a church conference and a church council. Church conference, everyone who is present as a member gets a vote. Church council, only the council votes. Are you with me on that? So it has to be a church conference. Now, in order to have a church conference, your district superintendent has to set and schedule that conference and is present at that conference. So you gotta work backwards. The disaffiliation policy gives 120 days to set that church conference. And so that you got to back up 120 days. And what starts that time frame is this: notifying the district superintendent of the intent to disaffiliate. Well, how do you get to that place? You have to back up. Here's what has to happen before that. Your church council would have had a vote just by the church council that they intend to seek disaffiliation. You would have had to do that before you notify the district superintendent. But before that, obviously, you want to plan and you want to prepare and you want to inform your church so that they will be well aware of what's involved with the option of disaffiliation. So you have to work backwards. Here's the thing. If you move to the next year, the exact same timeline applies. So you'll want to be aware of that for key dates. Now, there's been a question that's been asked at a number of these gatherings, and it has to do with what should our church do if we decide that we want to leave the United Methodist Church? Should we go independent, or should we consider, if we're a traditionalist church, should we consider joining the Global Methodist Church? And we just had a couple of ideas. Listen, every church has to make their own decision when it comes to this as God leads them. And one of the things we're grateful about our bishop, we're grateful for is this. He has said in meetings that many of you have been in, he has said this, that he feels that he has a fiduciary duty as our bishop to help churches go to where they believe they are being led to go. And so he's made that statement on the record a number of times, and I believe his heart is absolutely genuine when it comes to that. But here's some reasons that you might consider. I'm not so sure we want to be independent because of these reasons. One is this: if you join the Global Methodist Church, once it launches, here's what you can be assured of, that your church is going to get, if you're a Global Methodist Church, you're going to get a pastor who will be appointed to your church. You'll also be guaranteed that your pastor, if he's part of the Global Methodist Church, is and will be a Wesleyan, Orthodox, traditional pastor who is committed to upholding that doctrine and theology. You're also going to get a structure very similar to what you have now, but leaner for operation of your church. And you're going to be able to collaborate with other GMC churches. And some people may say, well, I still want to be independent. And that's a decision that an individual church has to make. We're not here to recommend that to anyone or to really make any comment other than to say it's something that you ought to consider if that's your church. Well, there's some next steps that we want to talk about. I think Brad, I was going to turn to you to do those, the next steps, if you would. Brad is he's the lay leader at Park Avenue. And I'll just tell you this, we've been working on this for about 2 years or so, Brad, at our church. We put together a protocol study team. So you might share a little bit of that and then cover these next steps, if you would, for us.
I don't know if there's any reason for me to come up there, and I hope y'all won't hold it against me. I'm an attorney. I do love Jesus, so if that does anything. And my mother's in the room. She got to be nice to me. We have been going on this for probably a couple years, and it's really gotten, I guess, a lot more frantic in the last 6 months. That may be a bad word for it, but we started talking about it among our leadership team, executive committee, all the leadership of the chairs of the committees about 2 years ago, and started planning. We expanded that to create a protocol study group. And through that group, we wanted to get a cross-representation of our church and make sure that all of those folks were well aware of all the things Jimmy has talked about. So, and we've been keeping up with it, frankly. But, we wanted to make sure that we knew where we thought our church was going, first of all. And there's a great tool out there if you have not done it. We wanted to make sure we were leading our church, but at the same time, everybody was following. And there's a great tool out there called the Crossroads Survey, which we were pointed to, which is a very inexpensive tool. For a church our size, it was about $500, so a little less than that, I'm sure, for a lot of churches. But it allowed us to do a very brief 10-question survey online, and we found out that our church was pretty well aligned with everything we thought they were. And we've had a lot of talks within that group about, where we want to go, where our church wants to go. One of the unintended consequences of this whole thing that I've been concerned about, we're lucky that we're in the South Georgia Conference and that our conference is pretty much traditional, and we haven't had any uproar like a Mount Bethel in the North Georgia Conference or other places around the country. But that lulls you to sleep. So we wanted to make sure that we talked about that we had a good idea where we were and where we wanted to go. We wanted to know what type of church we were. Luckily, we also have a pastor who's aligned with us, and that may not be the case in every situation. So those are tough conversations, but I think it's something you need to have, and to know, getting prepared is a tremendous task, and luckily our church has some staff and the resources to do that. I know that's not true in every church. Some small churches it is probably an overwhelming task, but we have looked at everything about our church, including our deeds, how our assets are held, how we own our property, what liabilities we have, insurance. We've looked at pretty much everything down the list. So getting ready to do that and creating a timeline, we're still not sure really exactly where we're headed. Like Jimmy said, our number one priority would probably be to leave under the protocol because it's the least costly option and the least, but I quite frankly, my opinion only, and I'm a layperson, not a minister, not as well spoken as these two guys, but I don't see us having a general conference next year. I don't see the protocol passing. I don't see our annual conference leaving at annual conference. And unless we want to continue down this path, the unintended consequence I think that we're going to start to see is folks starting to leave our churches and go elsewhere. And whether that, or not coming back, because a lot of us have been closed down through COVID, attendance not kicking back in and people just kind of being gone and us not knowing exactly why, but this could be part of it. So as good as our situation is in South Georgia, I think we have to be vigilant to make sure that's not. And frankly, we've been told by some folks we've consulted with that every time churches have gotten beyond this issue and left, their attendance has kicked up tremendously. So that's and this is not going to be pleasant. I don't look forward at all to the process. But I think the important thing and the message I would give to y'all, if I could give one, is start getting prepared and have a process. Don't ignore this because it's not going away, as Don said. So.
See if I can get that on. There we go. Just want to tell you about one other event. Did I turn you on? Let's try that. How about now? There we go. One other event that we have tried to promote around the conference. It's coming up on January the 22nd. It's going to be at Epworth by the Sea. It's a Saturday. It's from 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And we've invited some speakers to come from out of state. One of them is Jay Therrell. I don't know if you know Jay Therrell or not. I've come to know him over time. He's a great guy. He's from Florida. He was the district superintendent that desired to talk about these ideas and speak about the possibility of the traditional church being established in the Florida conference as well. And originally was told by his bishop that he could do that along with another district superintendent. But then after they started, they were told they couldn't do that. And the bishop put Jay on leave of absence. And so took him out as a district superintendent and put him on leave of absence. Well, after that, he, as president of the WCA in Florida, he began to go around and had the freedom to do so, talking to churches. I think he's been to about 190 churches to do a similar presentation as we've done tonight in the Florida conference. And so after he was doing that for a while, most recently the bishop, the cabinet, and the board of ordained ministry contacted him and said that he needed to provide for them a listing of all the churches he had been to and who was in attendance, names. And he did not feel that he could do that because he was concerned that they might be in some way prejudiced by the action that the cabinet might take against them. And so he gave up his credentials. He walked away from being an elder in the United Methodist Church because he didn't feel he could do that. And so he's going to be there to share with us. He has also been part of the writing team for the Book of Discipline for the new Global Methodist Church. And so he'll be there. The other person that's with the two other people, one of them is Kara Nicholas. She is an attorney out of, it's always attorneys it seems, I don't know. She is from Norman, Oklahoma. She is part of the transitional leadership team for the Global Methodist Church. And she has a heart for Christ. We heard her speak in Tulsa a few years ago, and we called her up and said, hey, would you just, is there any way you could possibly come to St. Simon's Island in January of 2022? And she said, are you kidding me? So she's going to be there. You would love to hear her speak. And then Jay Hanson, you may not know this about Jay. Of course, he's in our conference, the pastor of the chapel and part of our leadership team and delegation. He is actually on the transitional leadership team as well with Kara, and he'll be there to speak. So I hope you'll come and be encouraged and hear more about what's going on and what we should be doing. So that event is coming up. Now, I want to take some time for some questions. I know we've run over just a little bit, but if you have some questions, I think I'll be happy for Don to answer them all, and we'll move right on. So I think Rich Wardwell is here with a microphone. Rich, if you have a question you want to ask, we don't know all of the answers, and our answers may not be 100% accurate, but we'll do our best to provide information if we can. So if you have questions, just shoot them up here, and we'll do our best.
I don't know if the guys can hear me. One thing I failed to say, we've tried to say this to everyone. If any of you don't have resources and would like for us to come over, I have a day job, unfortunately, but at night or weekends or whatever, I'm happy to come, and Jimmy is too, I think, to come meet with any church or group or whatever to talk about specifics of what's going on.
I want to thank you for the presentation. It's been very informative, very needed. When you talk about planning, one of the things that we're not hitting very hard is, should we go independent, that means starting from scratch. Government, pastor, who's in charge? Are there any resources available to churches that are going to go that way? Because a lot of the planning we're talking about are meeting the dates, getting the paperwork done, but the hard stuff, when all that is said and done, are people in a meeting not knowing who's in charge, where the pastor's coming from, what direction they're going in. Has there been any thought about how to help the church through that difficulty?
I can tell you as much planning as we've done and as far along in the process as we are, while because of timelines, if you were to disaffiliate in June, the Global Methodist Church may not launch until September, we're hearing, or October. So just practically speaking, you may be independent for a time. But in our church, being independent scares the life out of me because of the long-term effects of being independent, and it also scares me practically for that short period of time because, even if we're independent for a short period of time, human nature starts to seep in, I think, and says, why do we want to go through this again? I was hopeful and still hopeful that the Global Methodist Church launches a lot sooner and that we can make an easy transition if we do that. But once you get past the legality of putting a statement of faith in your new 501c3 filing for your new entity that you have to be a new church, the question is can you follow that day to day? And is your pastor or the next pastor or the following pastor going to follow what you started as a traditional Wesleyan church? Are they going to hold up the same ideals, or are they going to seep in something a little different? And all of a sudden, 10 years from now, is your church totally different than it was today? And that's the scary part for us now.
Yeah, I would add to that. One, maybe you could just list some of the legal documents you have to have on board before you can really become an independent church. But the other thing that Brad is touching on, and I'm a pastor, I get that, but I was a lawyer for 20 years too before I was a pastor.
He's a reform lawyer.
I'm a reform lawyer. And what I would be concerned about, seriously, if I were still a layperson in a church that was thinking about this, and Brad touched on it, one pastor who is charismatic, who might have, sweet person, loving heart, really cares for the congregation, could come in to an independent church and change the trajectory of that church in just one pastorate. Does that make sense to you? And so that'd be something I would want to watch for and be sure of. I think the other thing as an independent church, and this is a reality, it might be a little bit harder for some churches to find a pastor. And I think that's true of some of our smaller churches, unfortunately. If you join another denomination, that shouldn't be a problem as well. So great question. There is no list anywhere that I know of that gives you, these are the things. But if you want to talk to Brad, he's probably as knowledgeable as anybody. Anything to say, Don? I did have another question here I'll answer that I got a text from. The question was this: can the disaffiliation plan be extended by motion or vote of the annual conference? I think the answer to that is yes. I think it could, and I suspect there will be a resolution coming to that effect at the coming annual conference in June. Okay, other questions?
Yeah, thank you. And before I ask my question, I'm Jay Knapp, and I serve all of you as your conference lay leader. October is Pastor Appreciation Month in the United Methodist Church, and I realize we're a couple of weeks removed from October, but this is the first chance since COVID I've had to be with a group of you like this. So I'd like to ask our pastors and their spouses, and I say their spouses because as a grandson of a Methodist minister, I know a pastor in the United Methodist Church has to have a partner in their spouse, in their ministry. Can we have our pastors and their spouses please stand and be appreciated? Thank you for that. And Don, I just want to revisit again because as a layperson and having conversations all across South Georgia, more and more this is what's coming to me, and I kind of am looking to you to give me a response to this. I'm being asked, after all of the process that this has taken because of the way we're designed as a corporate United Methodist Church and the way this has unfolded over years with the division and the agony and the frustration, if a congregation has finally reached the point, whether it be out of frustration or anger or just as Jerry Clower says, shoot up in here amongst us because one of us has got to have some relief. If they finally come to the place where they want to make that painful decision to disaffiliate, why in the world do they want to finally get unshackled from one corporate entity only to jump over and chain themselves to another? And I'm just being asked, as an independent Methodist church, you've got your structure. You don't have to explain to your congregation why you're paying apportionments for causes you may not all support. You support who you want to support. If you like your pastor, keep your pastor. If you don't, go out and hire you. SPR churches all over the country do it every day. And as we look out as United Methodist today, we've been talking for years about how the churches that seem to be growing and are alive are those independent churches. So help me understand why maybe even for a year or 2 years, as this kind of unfolds and cools off a little bit and we see what's out there, because, realistically, the global Methodist Church is in all likelihood not going to be the only option out there. Why is that not the best thing to do for our churches?
Sounded dry, it's because I'm a dry preacher.
Is your mic on? Did you?
It is.
Am I
Okay.
on? I didn't turn anything off.
You're on.
You're on. Go
I'm
ahead.
on. Hello? Camilla, can you hear me? I think I'm on. Okay, I'll just try to talk loud. And that's an excellent question, Jay. People always say that, don't they? Even if they think it's dumb. Oh, that's a great question, but that is a very good question. And I think that Jimmy has addressed that to some extent, that there is, in spite of the human nature that can turn an institution into a problem, an institution can also protect a local church and help it to stay on a certain set of theological rails if that's what it wants. One of the things that I have discovered as an individual Christian is that while as an individual I can seek salvation, if I want sanctification, I need other people to help me. I can't do it on my own. And I think if we want to be, I think a mature congregation can have the option of being in connection with other like-minded people if that's what we want. Now, if that's not what you want, if a church doesn't want that, then certainly you have every right to go independent. But I think if you feel like you want to be a part of a group of folks that have the same values and theology that you do, that are going to help work together to stay that way, to pull together for outreach, for mission, for dealing with your community, for remaining healthy, I just encourage folks to consider that option. Last week, I went to one of these meetings that the conference, I guess, sort of sponsored with Jay Hansen, and he mentioned, he started a church that's one of our strongest churches, the kind of congregation that you would think could very easily go independent. But he said, as a pastor himself, it just is frightening to him. He referred to having recently watched the documentary that's been done about a church in Michigan called the Mars Hill Church that became a super mega church, but was an independent congregation, and how across the years it began to unravel. Even Willow Creek, which is sort of the granddaddy of all mega independent churches, has gone through in the last several years a very difficult period because of problems with the integrity of their leadership. As much as I hate charge conference forms, I like knowing that every year we have to check certain things to make sure that there are certain things we're doing, whether it's practical trustees issues or whether it's the pastor giving an account of his ministry or her ministry. So Jay, I think that's a decision that a local church has to make. I understand that question because I believe in sin, and it can go either way. But I believe I need others who are like-minded, who understand Scripture in basically the same way I do, who have the same mission in mind that I do. And the people that I know who are a part of the global Methodist Church formation are all people that I trust, and I have that bias. So I don't know if I'm fully answering the question. I just think there is strength in an institutional, we are a connectional church. As a district superintendent for a while, there are things about the church that drove me nuts. It's a short drive. But I realized in the big picture that there was great strength in the process that held us together. So I don't feel like I'm answering that question very well. I think it comes down to where you think the Lord is leading you. And if you believe that it's in your best interest to be a part of like-minded people that can help you have some security and stability without the dangers of one or two people taking the church in a whole different direction, which can happen, then I think there is wisdom in being together.
Yeah, and I want to just add one thing too. It may have been you. I'm going to give you credit for it as having said it, but we were talking about this idea too, and kind of debating reasons for and reasons against. Maybe you. It was somebody who said this. They said, if you go independent, part of what you're doing is there's a sense that you're not abandoning, but you're I don't know, maybe that is the word. You're abandoning the people who have been fighting this fight for the last 50 years. These are people that have been in the trenches. These are people that are strong Orthodox traditionalists and who do not want another church that looks like the one we have now. And so there's a sense, too, that, I'm kind of waving the flag and just walking away from it all as opposed to, supporting those who've worked so hard to fight this issue for all these years, longer than I've been here. So I don't know whether that adds any validity to it or not, but it kind of spoke to me when I heard someone say that. Is that it? Oh,
Question? I got one here.
are we on the corner?
Right here.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Fran, and I want to thank y'all so much for being here. We have really, really needed this. I have earnestly listened to y'all and what y'all have explained. I am a simplist, and the question that keeps going in my mind is, we voted to be a traditionalist. Why did that not happen?
Well,
Yes.
I did try to, like I said, a lot of it has to do with the nature of our church law. And because of the growing number in the West of centrist and progressive delegates to General Conference, we're just at a point where it takes some of these votes to change things, take 2/3, and we can't get there. We can't change. We've tried the last General Conference, the last couple of General Conference, tried to get more accountability to bishops. We just haven't been able to do it. And so we're just sort of stuck, and we have a sense that we're at a sort of a tipping point where we just can't keep going on like this. But that, again, is another very good question. And I think for a long time, the people that Jimmy was talking about who have been fighting literally for 50 years to try to help United Methodism to be an Orthodox Wesleyan denomination had hopes that people whose theology goes in a little different or maybe a lot different direction would just decide they'd be better off, that they'd have greater freedom to do what they wanted to do if they would leave and form another denomination. When you go to General Conference, it is astounding how much politics there is. And I don't know about you, but if you know anything about politics, it never is rational. And it often goes in the direction of emotion and sometimes even in the direction of untruth. And that's where we are. People have fought. My father-in-law, Brenda's dad, Billy Key, was one of the early members of the Board of Good News. He's one of those people Jimmy was talking about. Went to General Conference 5 times, and they held the line over and over and over again. But we're at the point where we don't know if we can keep doing that. And so for better or worse, and as I said, a lot of good-hearted people who are on a different part of the church, they genuinely think it's their church. They don't, in South Georgia, it doesn't feel that way. I'm sorry, there's not a happy answer for that. But that's why I mentioned it in what I said, because I know it's a very frustrating question.
Got another one?
Thank you, fellas, for your time and your knowledge. My question is, okay, the question that I've got is the two options of the options you presented, the two options, the first one and the second one, disaffiliation and protocol. It looks like there's a real chance that the Methodist Church as it stands now is going to kick the can down the road again, like it's been doing for several years now, and puts us in a worse place for the protocol to come about. Is it possible for a church at this point to qualify for disaffiliation, and then if in fact the protocol does come about, because they both happen at a timeline at the same point, choose not to disaffiliate, but go with the protocol? Can you do both things simultaneously and take a choice if it comes out?
Great question.
I'll speak to that because it's funny you asked that. We've kind of been batting that issue around, and we've actually come down to, and I'm happy to share with you, a motion we put before our administrative council to basically do exactly that, and that is, to the extent we can, move towards thinking about disaffiliation, but condition that on if the protocol passes, and also if the annual conference were to pull out, but there be certain conditions on that as well, because we want to make sure if our annual conference were to pull out, that we had a leadership structure, a theology, some of the things Jimmy put up on the screen a few minutes ago. So I don't know if that's a possibility. If you look specifically around the Book of Discipline and Disaffiliation Policy and the protocol, it's probably not. I think we're going to, I know I'm going to try, Jimmy and I have talked about doing that, to try to get, and I was in a meeting one night this week, I had several, but with our new bishop, who's a fine gentleman, and what he at the end said, is there anything you would like me to do as a bishop? And I said, well, just in my mind, given the time frames and given all these things swirling around and the different deadlines, I said, I'd love for you to be a bishop who doesn't do things simply because that's the way we've always done them. Because I think it's going to take some help and some leadership on his part for what you're kind of suggesting to come about. Because I think we have some opportunities to do what's best for our churches and our annual conference and not have to disaffiliate. But we actually may have to disaffiliate as well, if that's where we come from. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to work some middle ground there, because I think it's better for all of us if we do that. And also, one of the other questions was on the Global Methodist Church. I just want to address for a second. If you've looked at the transitional doctrine, transitional Book of Discipline for the Global Methodist Church, there's a lot of safeguards built in there to sort of speak to some of the issues that's come up about that in terms of, not having bishops elected for life, different things along those lines, being much more of a lay-led church rather than a top-down church. Some protections for pastors that go awry in terms of traditional doctrine. So I think I see it as a good thing to become part of a church like that rather than going strictly independent. But I understand the reasons otherwise. So sorry if that didn't answer all of your questions. But
Coming up front here. Yeah, to get another mic.
My son is very involved in the other Methodist church in Valdosta, and he has tried to explain this to me before I decided. My husband and I just joined this church a couple of months ago. I've been a Presbyterian all of my life. First Presbyterian in Thomasville to split a couple of years ago. And as painful as it was, they simply took a vote. You had to be present to vote. And the winner took all. The progressives won, and the rest of us left. The Episcopalians got a lot. The Anglicans got a lot. My husband was Methodist. We liked Carrie, and we joined. But that seemed like this seems so, having grown up in the Presbyterian genre, with being very involved with their government, this seems so convoluted to me. And why can't there just, when we joined, Carrie told us, I believe in this. The last thing was alcohol, and we thought, ooh, okay. But with everything she said, this was exactly what we wanted to hear. And it seems like it's so simple. If you do not want to hear that from the preacher when you join the church, then go somewhere else. So I don't understand what makes this so complicated.
I truly don't. In South Georgia, I don't think it's that complicated, even though we laid out all these items. I mean, your church is going to be your church by and large. I think there's very few churches in our conference that are just going to be a 50-50 one way or the other. And while it may seem complicated, and the process needs to have a lot of thought that goes into it by the leadership of the church, by and large, I think there's multiple roads for your church to be your church and to continue on. And I think they, by and large, will be.
Yeah.
Here's
what I tell Park Avenue over and over and over. There are a few of them here tonight, they could tell you. When this is all over, Park Avenue is going to be exactly who they were the day before. That's what we're going to be. You know, you're still going to have your Sunday school class. We're still going to preach the gospel. We're still going to reach people for Christ. And we're not kicking anybody out. We're not asking anybody to leave. We're going to be the same church we were before. It is a simple matter, and it should be a simple matter. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Other questions?
How you doing? You know, we voted to be traditionalists, you know, in the beginning. What steps is our Council of Bishops taking to stop this trend?
Missed the last part of that.
What steps are our Council of Bishops doing to stop this trend?
Yeah, I didn't.
Stop the trend. Our council.
Stop the trend from going from traditionalist to progressive.
Yeah, we cannot depend on our Council of Bishops to do that. They're just not going to do it. I mean, you know, there were charges brought against Bishop Sue in North Georgia. Y'all knew that, right? In Mount Bethel. You know what happened to those charges? So the problem in the past has been, for whatever reason, and I suppose in their hearts they feel like they are doing what they believe is right. But we've seen it's just not going to happen. We cannot depend on the Council of Bishops. Now, in the Global Methodist Church, there will be accountability there. And here's one way it's going to be accountable. There will be term limits for our bishops. And that's significant because our bishops in the United Methodist Church are elected for life. And so there's some distinctions there that will help us down the road. But currently, if we're depending on our bishops, I think that's been part of the problem. And I don't think that would be something we should expect. But it's a good question. Like you said, good question.
You keep referring to the Global Methodist Church. Is that that is not an existing organization right now? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that have to be finalized before we can do all the other timelines?
No, it has to be finalized in order for us to join a traditional Methodist church, a new traditional Methodist church. And as I understand it, they're prepared to do that. They're ready to do that. They have said that they would not launch until after the so-called the proposed general conference in next year. But if the leadership sees that it becomes apparent that the protocol is not going to pass, they may launch sooner. So once it launches, then churches and even conferences, if we get to that point with protocol, can join the Global Methodist Church. So that they're prepared. The WCA, you've heard about them, they are basically the midwife for the Global Methodist Church. And once the Global Methodist Church is launched and becomes a viable legal entity, then pretty much the Wesleyan Covenant Association has finished their task. And so it becomes, we will then have the Global Methodist Church as the current expression of traditional Wesleyan Orthodox Methodism. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask you a question, if I could, a couple of questions. In the Book of Resolutions of the United Methodist Church, which is separate, of course, from the Book of Discipline, the current denomination statement of policy in that book is that the United Methodist denomination supports Roe versus Wade, which has legalized abortion. It also states that it does not believe in the principle of creatism, which is Jesus Christ being the maker of heaven and earth. what is the global church position on that, the Wesleyan position on that, or what will it be?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be the traditional Orthodox view. You can go to the Global Methodist website. We've got some references to the website, and you can actually see their transitional book of discipline, and you'll find the answers to all of that. You can go and search, but I know it's going to be and is Orthodox belief and expression. So you can find. It'll be different from what we have in the United Methodist Church. That's correct. There's a statement in there. I don't have it memorized, but you can find it. My understanding is that it addresses abortion from an Orthodox position. So. That's correct. That's right. That's right. And the Apostles' Creed under the Global Methodist Church Book of Discipline will actually be part of our, help me with the right terms, as opposed to it being referred to, it actually becomes part of our statement of theology and doctrine. I think I've got that right. Is that right, Don? The creeds will, and the Nicene Creed as well. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
I've just got a quick question. Why can't we have a conference that's coming up? Is it all political? I mean, we need to have that conference. I mean, I don't understand that.
You need to write your congressman.
Yeah, that'd do a lot.
I mean, you're right. I mean, corporations meet globally every day, virtually, but they're, we don't get to make that decision. The Commission on General Conference makes that decision. So we just have to wait. Are you going to speak to that? Yeah. He is now.
Yes. Yes, the Lord has just told me to speak to this. Well, I just want to assure you that the Commission on General Conference is working very hard to get us to have a general conference. That doesn't mean we'll have one, but there are people who are highly motivated as a part of that commission that want that conference to be held. They're working very hard. There's been a lot of work to get third world country delegates vaccinated. We have been told that all but 2 of the conferences in Africa, the delegates are vaccinated, and the only reason they haven't been is they won't take vaccines from China. And so they're waiting on vaccines from the United States. So there is a strong push to make it happen. But as we've said, problems with getting visas, transportations in the post-COVID period. We don't know where waves may come back. It may be difficult to do that. Parts of Africa, especially, technology is non-existent. I mean, you can't even hardly mail a letter to some areas of Africa. I don't want to paint them as, but that's the truth. But I want you to know that there are also a lot of progressives who want this general conference to be held.
That's right.
And one of the main reasons is we can't have a jurisdictional conference until we have a general conference. And all of these progressives who were elected to their delegations this last time, because progressives and centrists got together, we have a number, even in the Southeast, all the clergy in Florida, South Carolina, North Georgia, Virginia, all are progressive.
North Carolina. Yeah.
And so they are dying to elect progressive bishops.
That's right.
I'm not exaggerating. That's too dramatic, but they're eager. That's why they ran. They wanted to do that. I promise you, they are just as eager. Now, as far as our bishops are concerned, I really don't know. And all of our bishops are bright people. They're all committed Christian believers in their own way. I believe that. But it seems like when push comes to shove, when it actually comes to dealing with breaking the church up, it's hard for them to want to go in that direction. So There may be some folks at that level who are not interested in the conference meeting, but as far as from what I hear from people around the country, most of them are eager to get this done, just like we are. No. She asked if bishops have to approve the split of the church, but no. One of the things about General Conference is they conduct the business, but they have no vote.
Have a couple of questions. Are some of the people, the progressives that might be opposing separation, worried about the loss of income? And I would think that's probably a big issue there. But the other thing is, suppose we have General Conference and the protocol passes. How quick, or is there any idea how quick some of the separation, or you could start those wheels turning, and so churches can, or conferences can start charting their own path to the traditional path? Kind of what would, any idea of timelines on that?
Well, in terms of the timeline, what I know we had talked about from the conference level is that if the General Conference does meet and the protocol passes, there is a desire to have a called annual conference shortly thereafter so that our annual conference could make a decision about that. I think that's what I've heard and understand. I think Bishop Graves would lean towards following that same proposal. So it could happen pretty quickly, but there's going to be some birth pains. There's going to be a little bit of time before we can get the final thing in place. So it may take a year, but we can move towards that in that direction. I think pretty quickly as soon as the Global Methodist Church launches, assuming the protocol passes. And I can't remember what the other question was.
The other question was, are folks worried about losing resources if there's a split? And there's no question that that's an issue. When bishops are consecrated, they take a vow to preserve the unity of the church. And even conservative bishops take that seriously. And so that's a part of the mix. And there is concern about a split. There's concern about how that might impact some of our agencies around the world, missions, and that sort of thing. Would there be a period where there would not be support? There are some good reasons to be concerned, and I'm certain that there are people who don't want to give up maybe the control they feel like they have. But I don't think that's a major. I think we're past that point now.
We good? It's hard to see.
Okay. Is anybody else driving back to Dublin? Then I move that we end.
I think that's good. You want to just pray for us?
Okay.
Close it up?
Let me have a closing prayer. Father, our hearts are heavy and troubled at all that we've talked about. We wish so much that it all were just simpler, that we could just pull the sword out of the stone and cut things in two and get on with it. Have mercy upon us. Yes. Bless those congregations and people who are here tonight who are deeply troubled and frustrated and just want it over with. Lord, give wisdom. I think we all sincerely want your will to be done. And we pray that as we move forward, that we'll have a wonderful sense that you are, as we sung at the beginning, a waymaker who will help us through some of the difficult passages of getting to where we want to go. Help us to be patient where we need to be patient and impatient where we need to be impatient. And give grace, Lord, give grace. Also, we ask that in the midst of all of this, you will bless our churches to be fruitful in the meantime. For certainly the Great Commission has not gone away, no matter what happens. So help us to make disciples, Lord. And we'll thank you in your wonderful name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. There you go. Well, thank you. I came, I talked. You did it. You did it. Both of you did. That's good. Thank you, Don. Oh, and you too. You too.